The idea for this session was actually born as we were trying, we've been witnessing the effects of 2020 on our front line, and we wondered, how can we help? So we gathered up some professionals to help us sort through it all. And so today, I'm going to go over real quickly at the agenda. Today, we'll hear from Amanda Rae-Garcia from Marsh McClennen Agency, who will give us facts about our industry. So kind of from the insurance side, like what are we seeing? And then we have Zia Sheikh, the founder of the nonprofit Restaurant After Hours, who will help us dive deeper into how we can help. And after that, we're going into a panel discussion with the addition of Serah Morrissey, who is the Senior Director of HR for InterContinental Hotels, who's going to share her expertise. And we're also hoping to have Joel Rivas, the founder of nonprofit Herd, based here in Texas. They're out at a vaccination drive today, so we're hoping he'll pop on a little bit later in the call and join us for that. He's here. Yeah, isn't that cool? So during the panel, we have some questions prepared, but this is also a time for you to ask your questions too. So we're going to have time for both of those. So with this, I'd like to pass it over to Kelly McCutcheon, who's going to introduce our first speaker.
Hey, yeah. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. This is a regional training forum. If you have been a part of those before, they tend to be pretty interactive. So we've got a lot of great content for you, but we'd love for you to open up that chat box. And so many of you already have, but I think, establishing that community is a great big step that we can do to help all of our mental health. So we really appreciate you being here. I'm just feeling the warm and fuzzies already, seeing your faces. But without further ado, it's my distinct pleasure to get to introduce Amanda Rae-Garcia. So Amanda Rae is Director of Health Management Consulting at MMA. As Kirsti said, that's Marsh and McClennen Agency. That is our insurance broker at HopDoddy, and probably several of yours as well. And I see a lot of MMA reps on this call, so it's great to see you. And they are just the subject matter experts when it comes to having their finger on the pulse of the health industry. So without further ado, Amanda Rae, we'd love for you to take it away and give us the facts. What's going on out there?
Yes. Well, thank you, Kelly, for that introduction. So yeah, in my role with MMA, really that just means I am acting as a resource to our clients, regardless of industry or size, helping really to be their active partner around employee health and well-being. So it gives me a unique perspective, and hopefully it's going to allow me the opportunity to share some insight, especially with regards to mental health. This is really what's been impacting every industry, but especially yours. And so I'm going to take some opportunity to kind of dive in and set the stage for the discussion. But before I do, I wanted to make sure, like many of you out there, just an interesting fact, I grew our family with a fur baby during the lockdown. And so here is me and my puppy Demi, who's now a year old, and she keeps me running on a nearly everyday basis, and it's a love-hate relationship. But I thought that was probably the most interesting thing that's happened to me on lockdown, so I thought I would share. So as I said in my role, I really focus on providing our employees with a holistic look at well-being. So I know today we're going to dive into mental health and well-being, but it's really part of a larger spectrum. So as I start to talk to you about specifically behavioral health and mental health, just unfortunately, as we see with every condition, mental health doesn't operate in a silo, right? So oftentimes people who may have a mental health disorder or issue, they may be suffering with chronic conditions, they may be suffering financially, and that's really evidenced by the pandemic. It wasn't just one thing that brought on stressors, it was kind of this perfect storm of several different things that added to that mix. What we're seeing across the board is that is a top concern for employers. So we at MMA actually did a survey nationally to all of our clients. So again, regardless of size, industry, demographic makeup, and what people said was they want to see, information on the mental health crisis and how they can help employees. My conversation has shifted really dramatically in the last year. Typically what I do is work with organizations that have somewhat of wellness already in place, but the conversation is completely different. So now it's shifted from how can we add mental health to our resources to employers who've never thought of having wellness on their radar saying, how can I give my employees mental health help? because it's truly just, it's attacking all of us. It's really about trying to addressing whole person health. So I kind of talked about things don't operate in a silo. So mental health really just kind of ties into that conversation. We've seen that it's really about fostering an environment to help your employees feel safe and impact their culture. And this is really what's driving the discussions for every employer across the board, especially for what we've seen in our book. Dramatically, the information has said, what they said from them surveys was they wanted to see information about employee health and well-being. But this is a great graphic to explain just how much behavioral health is now leading the conversation. Our chief medical officer, Dr. Maston, regularly says that, mental health is somewhat the pandemic under the pandemic, right? Because what we are seeing with mental health is there's going to be effects long term, just like the financial crisis that we have to pull ourselves out of. The same is true with mental health, because this really affected every part of our culture, right? So whether you were, an employee, an employer, you were a mom, a dad, even the child, I think children are really kind of, are unreally sung heroes of the pandemic, because we really upended their entire lifestyle, right? So no longer were they able to go to Little League or school. So all of these things have really just created this perfect storm of behavioral health needs and mental health issues that are facing us. But bringing it to an employer level, what we're seeing is, regardless of your role with an organization, whether you are in that C-level, whether you are a manager or an individual contributor, so somebody who is a server, a bartender in that role, they have really decreased their mental health over, post-COVID. It has thrown everything out of whack, if you will. Leaders of organizations, they tend to carry the biggest burden. So you think about like the role that you may have as a parent, right? So in a sense, your C-suite is somewhat the parents of your organization. And so they're feeling it not only at home, but from an organization standpoint. They struggle with mental health issues in the workplace, and oftentimes they don't seek it out because as the parent, right, you're worried more about your children. So how do I give them the help they need? Significant work challenges are being presented. Virtual teams have caused some challenges, but specifically in the restaurant industry, what we're seeing is, for many of you, your workforce may look completely different than it did pre-pandemic, right? So just a lack of opportunity to engage in sales and help customers has really changed the look of the workforce. So these are all stresses that are unique to your industry, but it's almost like you can say, let's add this and couple it with a little bit more in-depth problems on those mental health issues. And as I dive in, I'm going to talk to you specifically about what are some of the struggles that we're seeing in the restaurant industry, particularly. And I can't see the chat, so please feel free to, interject with questions. And, Kelly, or if you want to just give me some insight, because I don't want to push through. I definitely want to address any questions. But here's a little snapshot of how the data looks in terms of what we looked like pre-pandemic. So this takes a look at 2019 through December 2020. And what you will see, right, so this maroon or this purple bar gives you an idea of the tremendous jump that we've had. So when you think of, we had 8% of people that were reporting anxiety disorder, now at around 37%. Same is true with symptoms of depressive disorder and anxiety. By far, anxiety has jumped the most, and that's because the sheer storm of COVID really is it has all the perfect variables, right? So many people who suffer from anxiety, it's the fear of the unknown. That brought on a lot in terms of COVID, right? The unknown in job stability, job security, children's school life, work life, all of those things. And as a result, we're seeing that more employers, 9 out of 10, are really planning to address mental health stigma and have concerns with employee access to behavioral health services. And when I say the stigma is real, you in the restaurant industry know that even more so, because there's a lot of stigmas associated, right? You can't show weakness, right? You can't give up a shift because that may mean that you are going to lose your job, right? So there's just a whole nother level that's specific and unique to your industry. So I just want to give kudos to you to having the conversation around it, because I think it's super pressing, especially regardless of industry, but especially yours with those unique factors. So what we're seeing, just again, some additional data. Overall, we have seen the #1 mental health diagnosis in our entire book of MMA is anxiety. that has replaced depression. So we saw that the trend was depression. And again, that's just because a lot of the unknown fears, it's a perfect environment to add to those anxiety disorders, people that suffer from anxiety attacks. 1 in 5 adults are, reporting that they have increased stress levels. During COVID, it's nearly 50%. So 45% of adults reported their mental health has been negatively affected. And I bet, if we ask that question in general, like how many of you have, increased some sort of your stress levels during the pandemic, I would say it would be probably closer to 90% than that 45%, right? Because we've all experienced it in some capacity. Nearly a third of workers, 2/3 of workers have higher stress because of the outbreak. The 41% marker, this is adverse mental health symptoms increased through substance use disorder and suicidal ideation. So what we have found within the restaurant industry is there's a higher tendency to have substance abuse dependence. And a lot of that is because think of, those of your barkeeps, your servers. It's an environment where a lot of times you're serving and entertaining, so it's constantly around, right? So it's very easy to self-medicate in that environment, right? And so there's also some additional data that supports, and you'll see later, that even people that are in a role where they're dependent on tips and things of that nature is highly stressful to financial well-being. So you'll see increased rates of suicide in that type of capacity. Opioids, again, I talked about self-medication. There's an increase, in 2020, we saw the results of opioid overdose go from 29% to 45% in nearly a year. So it's detrimental. So when you think about mental health, there's a full-on spectrum of things that are impacting folks. It's, it's substance abuse, it's sleep, it's depression, anxiety, sleep, all of those things go in. Here's a deeper dive into what that data. So when we took a look at behavioral health claims and what that means dollar-wise for employees, this was taking a look at our entire book of business, right? So we saw that there was a 5% increase in trends on behavioral health claims. On the bottom here, you'll see this broken out by age demographic. What's unique to mental health is that we tend to see that impacting individuals younger than we do other ailments like hypertension and diabetes, right? That's usually a marker about 45. We start to say, congratulations, you're getting all these health conditions. Mental health is different because it starts younger. And what we are seeing is it's starting even younger and younger in terms of suicide rates. We've seen people as young as 10, right? So it is a shift that's very dramatic. So there's a clear delineation between physical ailments and mental health. Think about your population. You'll see the highest points of these, again, are anywhere from, 20 to 40. Think of your own staff. How many of them are kind of falling in this demographic with your workers? This is a great snapshot looking at how this breaks apart from the family. So it's not just about your employees, but also by extension their spouse who may not have a job or maybe lost their job and their dependents. COVID has truly impacted every aspect of a family life and an employer's life too. Claims by gender, we see this primarily, women tend to report often, but I think some of the stigma plays into that. Women, it's not stereotypical, it's just, our innate nature, we tend to share more, collaborate, we have more comfortability with being vulnerable, which is key to seeking help for mental health. Men are taught to, very masculine society, pull up your bootstraps and you push through. I often think that's why there's numbers that indicate men tend to oftentimes self-medicate more so than women, and it's that, that ease of women to be more vulnerable in that space. This is a quick look at the cost. So I talked early on, I showed some data about, in 1 year, we saw through our entire client book a 5% increase in behavioral health claims. But what that transitioned into in terms of dollar-wise, nearly a 20% higher claim. So even though claims increased by 5%, financially, that meant about 20% in terms of cost. So you can see how this is really, that pandemic under a pandemic, it starts to really illustrate itself. So it's not even so much on the cultural impact, it's beyond that in terms of the financial impact that it's going to burden employers with. So what does this mean particularly to setting the stage for restaurant workers? So I've outlined, in our discussion, some of the causes, right? So COVID-19, the job instability in the industry, the fluctuating economy that has been inconsistent. the very act of coming into work. So you all had frontline employees, right? So where everybody else was on lockdown, in order to sustain business, you had to have some sort of staffing, right, that were jeopardizing themselves. And if you remember, as we started to roll out the vaccine, now there's a lot more access. But restaurant workers weren't initially included in that essential workers, right? We saw healthcare, right? But they were on the front lines talking to people in order to sustain business. There was a survey that that was done by the Heirloom Foundation. And one thing that I think is really interesting to know is only 18% of restaurants right now offer health benefits, which can sometimes cover necessary treatments, but most of the time that's not going to even cover mental illness, right, or EAPs, things like that. So those are just kind of set the stage for the causes. The effects are, that same survey indicated that 73% of chefs report that they suffer multiple mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, substance abuse. Restaurant professionals have the highest rate of substance abuse disorder. I kind of already alluded to that in terms of the environment that they're working in than any other industry surveyed. There's also a recent study that revealed that people in a service industry where they're, they're bearing their livelihood on tips and things of that nature, or they have shift work, sleep deprivation, they have a higher rate of stress because, every day they don't know what their sustainable income is going to be. 90% of suicide victims have suffered from both depression or substance abuse. So when you think about that in terms of the restaurant worker, it's almost the perfect storm in terms of everything that's being faced with that instability. So truly, again, I just want to commend you guys on taking the opportunity to have this discussion because it's an important one for so many other factors we're seeing across the board with society, but particularly for your industry. And I will pass that on.
Amanda Rae, we had one question and one comment that I'd love to read to you. And the first was just an inquiry about receiving the slides. Would you feel all right sharing these with me so we can send them out with the survey that we send at the end of this? I'm sure everybody would love it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Sure.
Yeah. And then you may not have seen it, but Kurt chimed in that drug and alcohol abuse has always been an issue for decades in our industry. And I think that you supported that. And I don't know about you, but it's helpful to see those stats, but definitely heart heavying. So with that, let's start transitioning to a little bit of storytelling and what we can do about it. Barrett, do you want to introduce our next guest? And thank you so much, Amanda Rae. That was really helpful.
Yes, thank you, Amanda Rae. That was excellent. Lots of good information there. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Zia Sheikh. He is the founder of Restaurant After Hours based in New York City. And he's doing a lot of good work on the ground. So we're excited. He's an amazing storyteller, and soon you'll hear he speaks from his experience, and you can tell he speaks from his heart. So take it away, Zia.
Thank you, Barrett, for the introduction, and thank you, Chart, for having me. Thank you, Amanda, for all that information as well. This is a topic that's very close to my heart. As Barrett explained, I am the founder and executive director of a mental health nonprofit for the hospitality industry in Brooklyn, New York, called Restaurant After Hours. Doing this presentation today, we are going to be talking about some heavy topics. So I do want to preface my storytelling by saying your psychological safety is a priority for me. So as I delve into these topics, as I start talking about depression, anxiety, how it affected me, suicidal thoughts, if you need to take a break at any point, I will not be offended. If you need to turn your video off, if you need to step away for a minute, if you need to take a drink of water, please do so. I don't want to trigger anybody. So we're going to be we're going to be talking about a lot of these topics. I want to make sure that everybody knows how to define them. So we're going to start with what mental health actually is and how it's defined. So mental health by the World Health Organization, defined as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her own community. Mental health, shortened, is all about how we think, feel, and behave. So those are the three that you need to say to yourself. It's all about how we think, we feel, and behave. Mental illness and mental disorder, we're also going to be talking about that. Mental illness and mental disorder are interchangeable words. Mental illness is a treatable illness that affects a person's thinking, emotional state, and behavior, which in turn disrupts daily activities and ability to engage in satisfying personal relationships. So mental illnesses, like physical illnesses, can lead to a disability if not taken care of. Disability by mental illness is not always visible. It's not so easy to see if someone is showcasing mental illness or mental disorder. So you look for signs and symptoms that can lead up to it. People with mental illnesses can be negatively judged as being weak, lazy, uncooperative, or really ill. And that's what leads to the word stigma. So the word stigma is a negative stereotype that's attached to mental illnesses. Now, Amanda touched on a couple of these things where there is just such a bad connotation in terms of like stigma, in terms of the hospitality industry. We are so uncomfortable to talk about it. It's the elephant in the room. The title of this presentation, it's a silent side effect. I would like to now tell my story about how mental illness affected me in this industry. And again, if anybody needs to take a break, please do so. I actually encourage you to do so. So I've been a chef in New York City for about 18 years. I've worked mainly in New York City, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. I was the type of person that I really put 100% of myself into this industry. I started working 8 hours a day, then I pushed it to 10 hours a day, then I pushed it to 12 hours a day, then I pushed it to 14 hours a day. The restaurant was my life because I really wanted to make something of myself. For a lot of years, a lot of chefs will always say, like, if you really want to make something of yourself, you need to put your all into this industry. You need to work those long hours. You need to make work your priority. And I fed into all of that. So I with me putting all of my heart into work, I was living at the restaurant day to day. I was doing 6 days to 7 days a week. I think my longest stretch without a day off was 23 days. I was working, up to upwards of like 100 hours a week, and it didn't bother me because of what the end goal was for me. The end goal was never defined. It was just like, you got to work hard, you got to work hard, you got to work hard. And it wasn't so much during the work hours, it was the time between the work hours that became really destructive. I grew an alcohol dependency being in this industry. So to take out that stress of work, I was drinking, I was blacking out, I was doing drugs, I was enabling all these other addictions just to get that stress out. During my worst, I was working 14, 16 hours a day. I was going straight to the bar, getting blackout drunk, sleeping for an hour, maybe half an hour, driving drunk back to work, and then going into my day again. And that was my cycle of life for years. And I never saw an issue with it because we fell into the hashtag chef life lifestyle, as Anthony Bourdain wrote in his book Kitchen Confidential. This is just what chefs do. It's part of our life. And I was just like, you know what? I can do it. I'm tough. I can just keep on going. And if anybody said that they couldn't work those hours, if anybody said that, that the party lifestyle was too much, that they couldn't drink, I was just like, you know what? You're weak. You can't handle this. I'm just going to step over you. I'm just going to keep on going. The morning of July 5th, 2015, I woke up in my car, realizing that I had almost made a fatal mistake the night before. And what that was it was a night of binge drinking, just like any other night. I was at the bar. This was in July. I felt really cold. I guess it was the alcohol that was affecting me. I went out to my car and I turned on the car and then I blasted the heat and I immediately passed out. So someone had found me passed out in that state. I don't know who found me. I never got a chance to acknowledge them or to thank them. But I woke up in my car with the windows down, my seat reclined, the keys on the passenger seat, and whoever had found me had given me a second chance. That in itself would have been a turning point for a lot of people. But because I was so deep in my addictions, I didn't let that be a turning point for me. So for the next 3 years, I continued down the same path of working hard, playing harder. And in June 2018, I was fired from a prominent chef position, very well-known restaurant here in New York. And it wasn't until that moment that I was fired where I was just like, you know what? I really need to start taking care of myself here. That's how little I valued my life at that point. It wasn't the fact that I had woken up in my car realizing that I had almost made a fatal mistake. It was because I had lost my job and I went from being at the top to now being at the bottom again. And that's what this industry had done for me. That's what that hashtag chef lifestyle had done to me. I had fed into it so much that I had no concern about my life whatsoever. So I had taken 6 months off from the industry to work on my mental health. I had entered therapy. I had started sobriety. But I was also in a position where I did not have health insurance anymore. I did not have access to resources that could help me. So during that time, I started compiling all these different resources. I started doing all that research. Where can someone in my position go to get help? Now, luckily, through the help of a fellow nonprofit here in Brooklyn, I was able to start therapy. I had made the personal decision to stop the alcohol, to stop the drugs, and in June, I apologize, in December of 2018, I had started Restaurant After Hours as a way for hospitality workers to access free mental health resources, regardless of insurance, to help out chefs that were in my position. So it's a very tough topic to talk about. I know that a lot of people are not comfortable talking about mental health, but through my lived experience now, I keep telling my story in effort to help out a fellow chef, help out a fellow hospitality worker. So it's good that we're now starting to normalize this conversation. This all happened to me in 2018, but now in 2020, after COVID, restaurants are realizing now that we did not have a safety net. COVID happened, restaurants were closed, hospitality workers lost their job. That caused a lot of people that did not have any type of mental health struggles beforehand to start thinking about, or not, to start developing symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of eating disorders, symptoms of like alcohol abuse disorders. People were starting to now put a spotlight on how all these things were starting to affect them because the work was taken out. You know, how is this affecting my personal life? And it's good now that we're starting to normalize this conversation because change is not going to happen overnight. By normalizing these conversations, by having more of these conversations, we can begin to start having a better hospitality industry for the next generation. And that's essentially what we're setting up for now. So with Restaurant After Hours, we are hospitality professionals. We are a team of hospitality professionals for hospitality professionals. We provide a space for emotional intervention for people that are going through mental health struggles. And one of the things that we advocate for is mental health first aid. So I do want to talk about mental health first aid and what it is. So mental health first aid is a early intervention program that's available for free, that's available nationally, that's available now virtually to almost everybody. I do encourage everybody to take the course because when you're talking about mental health, I know it makes people feel uncomfortable because you know, for just being uneducated on the subject, that we don't know how to talk to people, we don't know how to bring it up, we don't know how to approach people, we don't know how to listen to people. There's still so much stigma attached to it. Mental health first aid will change all of that for you. So it is an 8-hour program that is available for free that I encourage everybody to take. It will give you the it will tell you about, it will teach you early identification symptoms in terms of mental health. It will teach you what the basic mental illnesses are in terms of like depression, anxiety, eating disorder, and substance abuse, the top 4 that actually affect the hospitality industry. It will teach you how to listen empathetically, non-judgmentally. It will teach you body language, how to focus on all of that. And all these things are really important when you're approaching somebody with a mental health issue. Definitely. The website for mental health first aid is mentalhealthfirstaid.org. I do encourage everybody to go there and check it out. Now, along with mental health first aid, there are other intervention programs that are available through Restaurant After Hours. We do education, we do advocacy, we do peer support groups, we do public presentations. Along with our support groups, I know Joel also has HERD out of Texas, which also provides support groups. There's another organization, Chow in Denver, Culinary Hospitality Outreach and Wellness, which also does support groups. And then there's also Ben's Friends, which also does support groups in various cities as well. So what we've done as organization is we've set up that safe space for hospitality workers to go to. That is one resource to give to your employees, to provide help for them. We're here to help them in return due to our lived experiences. So in terms of just symptoms, like, you know, what can we look out for? So mental health affects everybody differently. There is no one symptoms that is portrayed by every single person. So again, mental health first aid will teach you all these different symptoms of what to look out for, but I just want to list a few of them. Some of them pertaining to depression, anxiety, eating disorder, substance abuse could be sad mood, loss of enjoyment or activities, fatigue, headaches, head pressure, suicidal thoughts, feeling worthless or guilty if not at fault, moving more slowly, loss of interest in eating or eating too much, dizziness, panic attacks, muscle aches and pains, sexual misconduct or harassment, just having those feelings of power, social problems, health problems, aggression or antisocial behavior, abuse of alcohol or drugs, tolerance for a substance, problems cutting down away from a substance, and isolation. Again, those are just some of the symptoms that can affect people. But if an employee if an employee is portraying any of these symptoms in one day, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have a mental illness or a mental disorder. But if they start to show a pattern of these, that's when it's best to approach them. And I'll go into all of that in a little bit. How can we help them? But it's usually around 2 weeks to a month of portraying this pattern of symptoms where we can start to say, you know what, this employee is, they're not working 100% again. I'm starting to notice it. I can see that it's starting to affect them. It's starting to affect the workers around them. And in the past, you know, we've been very quick to just be like, you know what, this person's not working out. We're just going to fire them. We'll be very quick to like write them up. We'll give them 1 chance, 2 chances, 3 chances, and then they're gone. But nowadays, we don't really have that luxury. You know, we need to hold on to our staff because we are seeing a labor shortage across the board. And we also want to show the employee that we do care about them as human beings. And that's the more important thing. We want to make sure that they are heard. We want to make sure that they are well taken care of. And in return, they'll show loyalty back to you. And so I do encourage that it is best to not to be dismissive of their issues, to learn how to approach them and sit down and talk to them and listen to them. So mental health first aid teaches you they focus on a system called ALGEE. That's ALGEE. And I do have all this information in slides. My slides are not ready to give to everybody. I will format this to give to everybody at the end of this presentation. So ALGEE, ALGEE. The A means assess the situation for risk of suicide or harm. Now, this is a very tough thing to acknowledge because a lot of people are not comfortable talking about suicide. Now, I can go up to somebody and just say, are you having suicidal thoughts? I can be very direct because I'm so experienced talking about it now. I'm ready to hear what they have in return. But for a lot of people, that's not so easy. You can't sit somebody down. And if you're showing that uncomfortableness yourself, they might not acknowledge you in return. They'll just be like, oh yeah, you know what, I'm totally fine. I don't want to talk about this. This is not the proper place to talk about this or anything like that. So you do not need to make sure that you are comfortable talking about the question. You do need to know how to format the question. And you do need to make sure that your body language is correct and that you are coming from a place of care. It is best to, when you are sitting down with somebody, don't sit across from them. Make sure that you are sitting at a diagonal or even better than that, would sit alongside them to make sure that you are on the same side. Because when you are sitting across from them and you ask them that question, are you suicidal? It might come off really bad and they might just get defensive and clam up. So assessing the situation for risk of suicide or harm, you also want to make sure that they are not self-injuring. You want to make sure that they are not harming people around them. I know, so chefs have this thing in the kitchen where not every kitchen does this, but some kitchens will do kitchen hazing. Well, they'll take their tongs and throw them into the fryer and then immediately touch their skin to see who has a higher pain threshold. It is like one of the worst things that they could possibly do, but that's what they do. So it's things like that. Like, you want to make sure that the team is not portraying signs of harm or more than that. Just, you want to make sure that they're not having suicidal thoughts. They're not talking. I shouldn't say that. People are going to have suicidal thoughts. You want to make sure that you're not dismissive of them talking about it. I know that this is something wrong that I've done in the past where I had an employee that was going through a tough time. And when I went to approach him to talk about how, for his lack of work for the day, he openly said, I'm having suicidal thoughts. And then he walked out of the building. And I didn't follow him. And it's one of those things that still affects me to this day to make sure that he is okay. But I was very dismissive of it. I was just like, this guy just walked out of my restaurant. Screw him. I'm not going to talk to him again or anything like that. I did not see him as a human being crying out for help. So it's things like that where if someone talks out loud that they're having suicidal thoughts, don't be dismissive of it. Don't turn the other way. These are cries for help. It's the best way to approach somebody and to offer them help. So the A, assessing the situation for risk of suicide or harm. The L is listening non-judgmentally. Be ready for what they have to say in return. If someone is comfortable enough to open up to you and talk to you, you don't want to show judgment on what they have to say. Everyone has a different density to their day. Things that affect you are not essentially going to affect everybody the same way. So say, for instance, things happen in hospitality workplaces all the time. Say the delivery didn't come on time. As a chef, I know that I can work around that. But for one of the workers who needs something off that truck to set themselves up for a station, that might all of a sudden make them feel anxious. Like, am I going to be ready on time for lunch? Am I going to be ready on time for dinner? Like something that doesn't really affect me could affect them a lot stronger. So if they come up to you with an issue and just say, whatever it could be, my son didn't eat his breakfast this morning. It's really affecting me. I had to leave for work, and I'm concerned that he might not get the nutrition that he needs for the day. And for someone who doesn't have kids, they could be very dismissive of that. They're just like, you're at work right now. Let's focus on work. Let's not focus on your son. That's something that's going to affect that person. That's something that's going to affect that worker. You want to make sure that you're listening to their problems, and you want to make sure that you might not be able to offer the best help, but that doesn't mean that you should be dismissive of what's affecting them mentally. Give reassurance and information. That's the G. So giving reassurance and information. I want to make sure that that your son is well taken care of. Where is he right now? Is he at daycare? Is there somebody taking care of him? What information can I provide? Pertaining this back to the hospitality industry, I see that you are going through an issue, something is affecting you. How can I best be of service to you right now? You want to put the employee at the forefront. You don't want to say, again, you don't want to be dismissive of it. You don't want to say, we're at work right now, leave your problems at the door. We need to focus on all the guests and everything like that, because that's when the employee is going to clam up. You want to make sure that you are giving reassurance, that you are listening to them, that you are giving them the comfort that they need, and then you are giving them the information that could help them as well. In terms of the next E means encourage appropriate professional help. Not all restaurants, not all hospitality professionals are set up to do this. The appropriate professional help would be a medical provider or a mental health professional. There are some hospitality workplaces that use EMPs or EAPs, I should say, to provide that help from an outside provider, whether it be a mental health professional or not all hospitality workplaces provide insurance where employees can go and get that professional help that they need. So in terms of hospitality, you want to go on to the last E, which is encouraging self-help and other support strategies. Now, encouraging the self-help would be make sure that you take time for yourself today. Make sure that you are feeling a little less anxious. Focus more so on self-care. Focus more so on reaching out to Restaurant After Hours resources page. Reach out to Herd, reach out to Chow, reach out to Ben's Friends, reach out to one of the organizations that is set up to help you. Restaurant After Hours resources page, we give 200 resources that are available for free for anyone to use. Now on there are crisis hotlines, on there are mental health organizations, hospitality organizations, Facebook groups, Reddit groups, and we just provide that community again for people that are looking for all those resources. Thank you for putting in that link. And so focusing on mental health first aid, focusing on algae, that's one way to start. But how can we pertain this now to the industry itself? Now, as managers, before taking mental health first aid, before learning all those things that can help, the most, at the very basic, at the very minimum, make sure that you are checking in with your team. Now, you want to make sure that with everybody on the team, that every single person, whether it be a dishwasher, a barback, a chef, a low-level manager, a high-level manager, even an owner, mental health affects everybody. You want to make sure that you are checking in with them, asking them how are they, and then getting ready for listening for what they have to say as well. For a lot of times, we are busy in the hospitality industry. We'll just be like, hey, how you doing? Like, and everything like that, and they'll just keep on moving. Ask people, how are you? And then wait for a response. All right, that is the very basic thing that we can do. Check in with your team, make sure that they are mentally healthy. It is okay to pull people to the side and say, you know what, I can see that you are having a bad day today. Is something the matter? Is there a way that I can help? And it's okay. And you know, like normalizing these conversations, once you get into talking about this more and more and more, you feel more comfortable having these conversations with people too. And your employees will also feel more comfortable coming to you as well, where they'll just be like, you know what, this person is ready to listen to me. I can be open to this person. And you'll see that that's going to translate to the entire team. So if you do not feel comfortable approaching your team and asking them how they're doing, it is okay to hire an outside consultant to ask them as well. But I do encourage you to do it yourselves, just to make sure that that everyone feels comfortable in the workplace. Everyone is ready to be heard, and everybody is listening to one another. So encourage open door policies. That's the next one. again, with the thought of not being dismissive, you want to make sure that your employees know that you are ready to listen to them at any time. I know that during the hours of service, it's going to be very difficult, but before service, after service, make sure that your door is always open. As managers, we are going to be very busy. We always have things on our plate, but you want to make sure that your employees know that no matter how busy that we are, we need to make sure that we are taking the time to listen to them. So an employee is never going to know just how busy you are. They never know how much is going to be on your plate. If an employee does come to you and says, hey, I have a problem, I want to talk to you, it is okay to say, I'm busy with something right now. Can we make time for this tomorrow? If you're not in the mental state yourself to listen to them, make sure that you tell them straight out, hey, you know what? I would love to listen to your problem. Can we set aside time tomorrow? Can we set aside time in an hour? And then make sure that you're adhering to that. If you give your employee a time and says, hey, we can talk at 12 o'clock right when you walk in the door tomorrow, make sure that you are available at 12 o'clock, no matter what's going on with your next day, because you promised that. And that in itself says a lot to the employee. It shows them that you are making time for them to listen to them. This is one that as hospitality managers, we know, but it is very important to say good morning and good night to everybody. But at the same time, you don't want to just shout good morning to everybody and then just walk away. Again, say good morning, wait for a response. You can visually see just how the team is responding to each other in just an instant. Do a pre-shift check-in. One of the things that I used to do when I was a morning manager was when my team would walk in the door at 6 o'clock in the morning, I would just pull them all together, say good morning to them, and then say, how's everybody feeling today? And then give them basically a checklist of all the things that we need to do for today. I think there was one day where someone said straight out, I'm not feeling all that great. I'm going through an issue because he was actually drunk from the night before. And so it gave me an opportunity to acknowledge that, and it gave me an opportunity to deal with that right away. But it is very important that you do pull your employees close. You want to make sure that the synergy is there. You do want to say good morning, wait for their response, and then same thing with good night as well. When you are saying good night to everybody, you can ask them, how was your day today? And if someone is saying it wasn't so good, you can choose to talk to them right then, or you can just say, I'd love to hear about it. Let's talk tomorrow. This is a big one also in terms of the hospitality industry. We are very, very, very busy professionals. You want to make sure that you are encouraging breaks throughout the day, not throughout the day. You are encouraging breaks for your team during the day. Here in New York, I'm not sure how it is in Texas. It actually is a law that employees that work more than 6 hours a day need a 30-minute break by law. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure if that translates to Texas, but it's one of those things that I do encourage breaks with your employees. Make sure that they are sitting down, make sure that they are eating, make sure that, they're feeling that anxiety. They're getting ready for service. They know that, during a busy night, they're going to get rocked left and right. Just tell them straight out, it's okay to sit down. It's okay to talk to each other, take 30 minutes to yourself and re-energize. Family meal is also a great chance for encouraging team building as well. Encourage the team to talk to each other. We have a tendency to talk front of the house with front of the house and back of the house with back of the house. Make sure that the back of the house and the front of the house are actually talking to each other. That's how you encourage team building. You can, and as managers, one way that we can do that is if you're the front of the house manager, sit with the back of the house team. If you're a back of the house manager, sit with the front of the house team and encourage everybody to talk to one another. I do know that we are getting close on time. I can talk about this stuff for hours. I just want to make sure that, I can cut it off here, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address them as well.
Thank you, Zia. I think
Yeah, of course.
this will be a great transition to the panel, and we'll certainly give you some time there to answer questions. So, gosh, what a powerful story. I really appreciate, from the bottom of all of our hearts, appreciate you being open-hearted with that story and, using it to ultimately for good, right? To share with us and that we get to learn through that experience. So I think that one of the things that struck me as I heard you talking, and everybody on this call, everybody on this planet has done some heavy lifting over the past year. So I think you all deserve to give yourselves a pat on the back just for being here on this call, because I think there's a level of heavy lifting emotionally that we're all doing, you know, now and past now and into the future. And everything that you're describing, Zia, is what I hear. You know, having those conversations, those uncomfortable conversations, you know, we never get to the comfort zone if we don't go through uncomfortability first. So being here is being uncomfortable. So it's a really good first step for all of you. So I'm just so thankful that you're here and doing that heavy lifting. I would also share that, you know, I recently transitioned from training to training and HR. And one of the things that was the scariest for me was employee relations, right? I was so worried about picking up the phone and having people yell at me all day. That's how I pictured it in my head, right? And I think, yeah, Serah, and it's truly the most rewarding thing. So anybody out there that's thinking, oh, I don't want to have that kind of conversation, I don't want to ask how somebody is and really genuinely hear the answer because it's going to be an emotional burden on me. Let me reassure you that it's not as much as you think that it would be, because many hands make light work, right? When that person unloads what's going on with them and you pick up a corner and they've got a corner and you involve some other people in EAP or, you know, something like that, all of a sudden the burden becomes a little bit lighter. So really appreciate that inspiration. So I do want to turn it over to our whole panel. We've got a couple of questions and I want to encourage everybody on this call, if you've got burning questions, type it in the chat. We'll have some time as we wrap up to ask questions from the group. What are those burning things that you just want to know and want to gain from the rest of our time together today? So really encourage you to do that. But you know, in addition to Amanda, Rae, and Zia, we also have Serah, as Kirsti introduced, our current chart president, and we're going to pick her brain for a little bit. We also have Joel here. Joel, we're so thankful that you're here, and I'll turn it over to both of you first. Serah, I'd love to start with you. You know, we just heard from Amanda, Rae, we heard from Zia. So let's hear from you. Why is mental health such an important subject to you? What can you share with the group?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I try to get to as many of these as I can. I am currently going to be a 26-month chart president, which I didn't see coming. Usually it's 12. That's what I was elected for, but here we are. So looking forward to having some newness in our chart life. I am a very outspoken advocate for mental wellness, for mental health. Amanda, Rae was talking about trends, and I learned that I was way ahead of the trend because I had anxiety back in 1998. So, you know how people put their initials, you know, PhD, whatever, after their name. I have PTSD, GAD, and PD. So I have post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and panic disorder. And why it's important to me is because I want to leave every person better than I found them, every situation better than I found it. And I learned that by using my grief to good is what always goes through my mind. It is very helpful to other people that I am an open book. I say I have no boundaries, which is not good for an HR person. But what I mean by that is nothing is off limits, because if I can share my humanity with another human being, and because of that, they say, huh, you can succeed, you can thrive, you can be a good mom, you can have a good career, all with mental illness. That's the solution. Is not trying to avoid it, not trying to stigmatize it, not trying to put it away, but carrying it with you as one facet of your story. It is not your whole story. It is one layer of a beautiful life, is how I sum it up. And because I talk about it so openly, I see the change. I hear people say, oh, you're on Zoloft too? How many milligrams? Or because of you, I came in and talked to my therapist, or I set up a time with the therapist. And that isn't tooting my horn. That is what I am called to do. That is my purpose. Our industry, as everybody learned, has a much higher rate of mental illness, mental health disorder. And, you know, just since COVID happened, and I'm sure you all noticed this too, hospitality professionals don't know what else to do. If you're a chef your whole life and suddenly 0 kitchens are open, you don't know what to do. That's all you've ever done. That's all bartenders have ever done. That's all my room cleaners have ever done. And that sudden stop of all operations was so catastrophic. And I lost a lot of people to overdose, to suicide, because of that being lost. Nothing else to do. And, you know, until my dying day, this is the platform I'm going to be loud about. And I know that was a very long-winded answer. But it's, you know, people say, oh God, I never would have guessed that you had mental illness. Okay. Never would have guessed you say things like that out loud, but that's okay. But we do need to talk about it more. And I have worked very hard in our hotels to make it a common topic. So long answer, long-winded.
Powerful answer, Serah. We really appreciate it, and all the work that you're doing to break the stigma. What a feeling to know what your life's work is about, you know? Thank you. Joel, I'd love to turn it over to you and give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. And I'd love for you to share, what is your advice for folks on this call who right now are thinking of somebody that they should have this conversation with?
Thanks for having me on. And this has been fantastic, Zia. It's great having you. Serah, it's so amazing to have people in it's so important to have people, especially in HR, that normalize what mental health and mental illness. And that's going to be one of the first steps. So to really getting people to talk about it and come out of their shell. So I'm the CEO and founder of Saint City Culinary Foundation. I founded it in 2017, and we started our first program that we launched was HEARD, and we focused on mental health and wellness of people that work in food and beverage and hospitality. So we do everything from in-person support groups to underwrite therapy for people that work in the industry that can't afford it, to offering telehealth care for people that don't have insurance and need frontline medical care, and also working with owner operators and their teams on talking about mental health in the workplace, and working with leadership in food and beverage to have those conversations with their team. So advice for people on the call, you know, I think the biggest thing is exactly what what Serah was talking about, and that's normalizing the conversation and taking the stigma out of it. I'm of the opinion that I tell everybody this. I think everybody could use some therapy. I think it's fantastic. It's done wonders for me over the years and people I know. I think that just having those conversations and bringing that to the forefront of the hospitality industry is vital. We work in an industry that's full of givers. We work in an industry that's full of people whose emotional payoff is serving and making sure people are happy. We work in an industry where a lot of times we break ourselves apart so that we can help keep people together. You see that in bartending all the time, and them helping people with their relationships, and that's the payoff. And so, but we also work in an industry that's very tribal and very family oriented. We work in an industry that the people they work with tend to become their family. For a lot of our employees, if they don't have something to eat, their family meal or their shift meal is the only thing they eat that day. If they get kicked out of their parents' home or they get evicted, They usually crash on the couch with somebody they work with. They work a lot of hours, and so their social outlet a lot of the time are going to be the people they're with. And so because of that, there's a lot of great things that come of that. There's a lot of great relationships, and there's a lot of great support. There can also be some enabling that happens. But also because of that, people taking the first step to come forward and say that there's an issue. That's why what Zia was talking about, that mental health 101, things to look for, is so incredibly vital, and keeping an eye out. But being able to create a safe space for them to come forward, because usually that's a hard first step. And so that was when we started doing support groups in 2017. It was with the intention of creating this safe first step for people to come and sit down and talk and listen and share struggles and successes, but do it in a group of peers that are dealing with the same thing they are on a weekly basis. So, but again, to answer your question, it would be my advice would be to create a space of normalizing talking about mental health, and breaking the stigma of, and just letting people know that it's okay not to be okay at the end of the day.
Very powerful words. I appreciate you sharing that. I can't help but think that when we talk about the stigma of mental illness, I think there's also a stigma around mental health, right? I know I went into this conversation kind of thinking of those two words as interchangeable, right? And they're actually the opposite ends of the spectrum, and you need to pour into one very similarly to what we do in our careers. So in training, while everyone on this call is in training in some capacity, it's an investment that we make. We train new hires so that they're great at their job and have the resources to do great things and have the potential to move forward. We have similarly with mental health, I think there are ways that you can make that investment in we talk about self-care, but really putting mental health at the top of that. I'd love to open it up to the group with a question. What best practices can you share from organizations that are making an impact, right? Everyone on this call is a networker, and we love to know, hey, what are you doing out there? What best practices can you share? So, Serah, can we start with you? I know being front and center in the hospitality industry, what can you share with us?
Absolutely. And these are things I love to share because you get best practices from practicing a lot, and a few things stick, right? So I have many answers. The first is passive information. So when Serah realized that not everybody is an extrovert with no boundaries, once I accepted that, I asked, how are we going to reach people who aren't comfortable and to the discomfort that we've been talking about? So we actually have a mental health bulletin board now with rip-off sheets that our team members can take with them. They can take photos of the posters. We also put folders in the locker rooms and in the break room, kind of a free take one of different handouts on different disorders, anxiety, depression substance abuse being up there. Also on the back of the stalls in the locker rooms, we're lucky enough to have stalls, at least to a small degree, but posters about if you are in a relationship where you're getting hurt, because we know too that is something that has gone through the roof due to the pandemic and people being on lockdown. So that passive information, hopefully nobody's in the stall with you, so you can take a screenshot of those or not a screenshot, but a photo of the poster. So the passive information is just as important as any campaign. Having the "it's okay to not be okay" posters, they're plastered all over the back of the house. at our hotel. So that's something that has worked. Another thing I did in my HR role was I helped myself to the policy language on sick days and included mental health in the sick time policy. On Monday, I said, I'm not coming in today. My mental health isn't where it needs to be. And my boss, he'll be the first to tell you, he's very old school hotelier. And he has learned this language of mental wellness because I'm in his face all the time. And he said, good for you. You should use your sick time that way, because you don't use it because you're throwing up or get a cold. And that what we model, and this is to everybody, what we do, we model the behavior we want to see in our team. So if they see that the senior director of HR is taking a sick day for mental health, then they know it's okay too. So addressing that in policy language is so important, just to normalize it and make it on par with any other illness. So those are two of the things that have been really effective.
It's awesome. I know I'm moderating this, but guys, I am feverishly scribbling notes and getting a lot of really amazing things from that. So thank you for that. I got such an aha. Zia, anything to chime in there? What best practices can you share from, you get to interact with a lot of organizations that are truly making an impact?
Yeah, I want to be very honest here, is that, like, in terms of just the organizations, like, we're all still fairly new, and I don't want to, that's not to discredit what anybody's doing, but it's really hard in terms of just the organizations about who's doing it right now, and who has the best practices, because this problem is so large that as small organizations, we're all attacking it from different angles right now. And we don't know what's going to be best practice. We don't really know what's going to stick. We're all trying our best right now. So just in terms of the organizations, like, all the organizations are offering something different, and we don't know how someone's going to relate to a certain practice right now. We just don't have that information compiled. So there are organizations that are doing different things in terms of restaurant after hours. We're providing the support groups, we're providing the education. I know Joel spoke about Herd as well. There's Chow, there's I've Got Your Back, there's Not 9 to 5, there is Serving Those Serving out of Minneapolis. There's Cook's Creed Foundation out of Baltimore. All these different organizations, still fairly young, founded in the last 2-3 years. We're all trying to find what's best for everybody for the industry right now. So it's a really hard thing for me to answer. So I am just going to self-promote and just say we have amazing resources on our page. I direct everybody to that. So
thank you for sharing. I think
Yep.
that's a huge takeaway for this team, right? To know, hey, somebody's got your back. So that's great. I do have one more question for the group, and I do want to open it up to the group, but I'm going to plug it and then not let you answer it, because we'll save it for the end. Okay. So Barrett, I'm going to ask the question, but I'll let you wrap up with it once we get through some of these questions from our participants. So that question, I'll give you a chance to marinate on it. If this group walked away remembering only one thing from our conversation, what would you want it to be? So marinate on that one, and we'll wrap up with that in just a couple of minutes. But Barrett, you got some questions from the audience you want to field?
Yeah, there was one that I saw. It wasn't necessarily a question, but Kurt wrote in, if we could have from the group, is what is some way that someone like us that may not have a seat at the table or has a seat at the table, but still needs to be able to sell this to our executives, to start this process of incorporating mental health issues into our medical plan or whatever it may be? What would be some advice that you would have to help sell this information to our higher ups? Maybe Serah?
I just thought of something. Could you tell by my body language?
Yes.
Not expressive at all. There is, and I can't remember, I will be sure to share back with everybody here. One of the websites that I use, I don't know if it's Workplace Mental Health or if it's the Anxiety and Depression Association. I mean, I belong to all these clubs, right? There is a calculator online where you can calculate the cost of mental illness to your business. And so if you have people who like numbers to drive everything in your organization like I do, that's the way to get to them. When you account for presenteeism, people are there, but they're not there. When you account for missed time, low productivity, the impact of the mood on the team, there are calculators. I just don't remember which bookmarked site they're in, but I will share back with the RTF leaders and ask that they share out.
So I wanted to add to that point, and you know, because it is hard sometimes. Every organization has a different culture, and you may not have an open door policy where you have that immediate connection to your leadership team. Don't underestimate the value that you have as an individual in that supervisor role or managerial role to really kind of drive culture change. You know, I heard one of our clinicians recently say that, and I wrote it down, the person you report to at work is more important to your health than your doctor. So it really starts with that manager, supervisor. You know, you kind of gave Barrett a great softball question, because if I was going to answer that, I would say do something. You know, we've talked about, you know, so, you know, if you can walk away with anything, it's that you have to do something in this space. You know, I've heard, you know, in terms of looking to remove the stigma by having conversation. I think, you know, if I would add to that, it's being transparent with your message. You know, sometimes your employees just need that you don't know, but you're acknowledging that, right? I mean, that kind of takes away that fear of the unknown. We don't know, but we're going to go through this together. So I think I would just add being transparent to whatever you're doing. If you don't have the answers, let them know, you know, because I think, you know, it adds to our own isolation and fears when you're not being acknowledged, because we start having this own internal battle with, oh my gosh, you know, why am I going on? So sometimes just that connection by being together in that unknownness, I think, is a good thing. So, you know, that's one thing that I would add. So I know, you know, it is important sometimes for initiatives to start from the top down, and I get that, and I drive that all the time with our clients. But don't underestimate the power you have as an individual to these stigmas, because it really is, you know, I think that quote just stayed with me because it makes sense. You see your doctor once a year, but you see the person that you work with and for on a daily basis. So they have the most impact in the influence to your mental health.
Yes, excellent. Zia or Joel, did y'all have anything on that topic? Because I know it's important, and it's important for businesses to get buy-in across the board. So,
you know, I think one thing to remember is that just keeping things also practical. A lot of times it's easy, and I worked in corporate healthcare for 14 years in business development, and so when I went back to the industry and did this, you know, when talking with you know, a front desk clerk at a hotel, or a bartender, or a busboy who is trying to you know, is trying to take care of themselves, but and they do see the posters on the wall, and the passive advice is great, but also when you get face to face, keeping things really practical and keeping that in mind. You know, these are people that aren't, when it talks about, when you talk about like financial wellness with them, they don't really want to hear about a 401k as much as they want to know, how do I get a checking account when I owe Wells Fargo $400 and I'm trying to get a loan for a $4,000 car? Like, those are real problems that are practical and things we have to address. And so yeah, I think just keeping that in mind whenever talking about mental health as well, is the practical ways they can take care of themselves and stuff. So I think that's just something to keep top of mind always when, you know, going back out into the field. So
thank you. Well, excellent. Kelly, do you want to get that answer for the last question?
Yeah, absolutely. Then Kirsti, I'll turn it over to you to wrap it up. But Amanda Rae, maybe we can start with you. If this group walked away remembering one thing from this whole conversation, what would you want it to be?
Yeah, I think it's do something. You know, this is it's an exacerbated problem. So I think, you know, organizations that are doing well with a mental health initiative, one, they usually embrace it they do make it an actual initiative for their organization. So even outside of, you know, a wellness program, like I said, people that have never even thought of wellness, mental health is now part of an initiative that's driven from the top down. So I know it's hard to get that buy-in, but if you can, it will just add to the success. And then, so I would say, you know, that's where I see people that are doing well in this space. They're also doing a variety of things. So I think there's not just one set things, but it's having multiple sources to influence your employees. And I would say it's a message that has to be somewhat redundant and repetitive, right? So one of the things I tell my clients is it's like you have a wellness plan, and then right along parallel, you have a behavioral health plan, because you're having to do both things to drive that importance in that message. So to get to do one thing, I'd say do something. We've kind of heard a ton of great things, right? So, you know, being transparent, you know, reducing the stigma, getting an actionable behavioral initiative, that's one thing that is really powerful. But other things, you know, I wrote some things down, making time to listen, making sure you recognize your role as an influencer and as a leader. It starts with you, because people can be influenced. It doesn't, well, it's so much easier to attain when it's from the top down. There's a way to influence upward, and it starts at the local level and what you can do and what you can drive. Because if you're opening that conversation with your employees, think about a network or a region, people are going to take notice, right, to your store, to your restaurant, and seeing what are you doing differently. And if it starts with the way you're leading and being open with them around this topic, you know, all the better. So it takes a little longer, but hopefully that gives you some insight. And then the last thing is share the data. Like, we've given you some information. That's a powerful business case, you know, because sometimes you do have to sell it to leadership, right? That, yeah, we know it's important, but what does that mean from a bottom line in terms of expenses and what that's costing all of us? Hopefully you walk away with some things to arm you with that discussion.
Do something, such a power. Do some things. Do
Do something.
Awesome. Joel?
Don't do anything. The worst thing you can do is not do anything after this conversation, right?
Great.
I would just say when it goes to talking with trainers or any team members, that at the end of the day, the most important thing is balance, and balance looks different for everybody. And sometimes that is, you know, going to therapy or support groups. Sometimes that's sobriety. Sometimes it's scaling back and just implementing some wellness into their life, like yoga or bike riding or just walking around the block. So just simply that balance is paramount, and mental health and physical health are two big parts of that balance. So.
Oh, I love that. One of my personal mantras is, when I feel blue, I get to green. When you go out into nature and just kind of recenter yourself. So that's powerful. Thank you. Zia, what's your one thing?
I'm actually very happy that Joel just said that. Balance is a very big thing when it comes to mental health and physical health. Also, what Amanda just said, to do some things. The only thing that I can really add on to that is be alert. Be alert to people around you. Make sure that you are seeing them. Make sure that you are listening to them. Just keep your eyes and your ears alert at all times. Sometimes they will give you. Sometimes it's very easy to overlook. The symptoms or the signs that they may be portraying. So it's very easy to be dismissive. It's very easy to just walk right past it because we are so busy as hospitality professionals. Just make sure that you are alert, make sure that you are listening, make sure that you are seeing them.
Be alert. Thank you. Serah, bring it home for us.
Bring it home. Well, I'm a rule breaker, so I have three things.
Rebel.
There was a study done by it might have been the CDC, the same study that has the 1 in 5 adults have mental illness, but fewer than half are treated for it. They found that some exorbitant % of employees want their leadership to talk about mental health. They want to talk about it. So with that in mind, the thing I forgot to say earlier is, with any conversation, if you're not sure how to approach someone, always lead with, I care. Lead with that. Lead with, I care about you and I've noticed. I care about you and just have to ask. I care about you, ... You are going to have people who are pissed off. You are going to have people say like, how dare you say that to me, or get defensive or get upset. 9 times out of 10, those people circle back with you in a couple days and say, you know what, you're right. There is something going on. It's approach. There's no perfect way there's no cookie cutter for how to approach people. But if you lead with care and you lead with love, which is my whole purpose for being, just lead with that. They will hear that. They will hear you, even if they snap back. And then from a takeaway perspective, if you visit workplacementalhealth.org, that is where I started when I didn't know how to sort of create an initiative around this. And they have a workplace organizational assessment. So how conducive is your workplace to improving the culture toward mental health? And we scored an 8%. I don't know why that's a secret, because it's not. But we scored 8%. And within a day or two, I was able to get us to 50. So there are little tiny things that you can do that don't take time and money but that assessment was huge, because that's another thing I could take to the stakeholders and say, hey, we don't want to be at the end of the curve on this one. So that's one takeaway. And there's a ton of resources on that site as well. But in closing, I would just say, oh my gosh, you guys, the lights go off on a timer. So now it's ghost stories with Serah. If you have a story and you're comfortable telling your story, tell your story. That will move mountains, and most of them you'll never know. You'll never know. Sometimes they'll tell you, but by sharing your personal story, it tells somebody else it's okay. And this is survivable, and you can thrive, and you will. But not everybody's comfortable saying that, but I really thank Zia and Zia. I've been saying your name interchangeably. I apologize.
It's totally okay.
I'll just call you Z. But your story, you sharing that story, you don't know that someone on this call hasn't, had the wake up in the car moment. And it's just so very powerful. If you're able to share, then do, and lead with I care.
Well, we appreciate everybody sticking around. Kirsti, you want to wrap it up for us? We'll need you to, there you go.
Yeah, no, I'm unmuted, nothing. My heart is just so full right now, and I might get emotional on everybody just because it's just really impacted me. I think my takeaway is, I think it's important to put the humankind back into hospitality. That's kind of what stuck with me. The empathy, compassion, being in the moment, sharing your story. I'll just share one little piece that a lot of you may already know, but I lost my former husband to alcoholism in 2015, and he was a chef. So I've been inside of this topic for a very long time, but I don't think I even, realized how big of an impact that had on me. So I just wanted to start by sharing a tiny piece of my story today. And I'd like to continue this conversation forward, that's for sure. And I know that we have tons of resources that we've built here. I've learned tips that I want to put into practice with organizations. And I know we'll be sending some of these resources out as a collection when we get the list of participants from everybody. So anyways, that's kind of my 2 cents at the end. So I want to thank you so much to Amanda, Rae, and Zia, and Serah, and Joel, Thank you so much. I wish we had another hour to keep going. So. I think that's it for me. Anything
I'm
else?
just gonna keep staring at myself in this light.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to our panelists and speakers. We really appreciate you. You're wonderful humans.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go do some things.
Go do things.
Thank
Bye.
Go do all the
Bye.
things.
All the things.
you.
Put your feet
Bye.
in the
Bye.
All right, Barrett, I'm going to end the call.
Yeah.
Wonderful
excellent.
job. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yep. We did it.
Yay. We survived.
All right. Bye.
See you later. Bye.